I believe. He's a big character, very interesting. The reason I'm showing you him is he's a patron of the charity I used to work for. So when I did my PhD and my postdoctoral research, I was based in a charitable organisation. We did research, but also talked to the public about medical applications of lasers. And he was one of our patrons. And part of my job as a researcher was to communicate our research to patrons of charity, to the mayor of the town, to all kinds of people, to people who would give us money. That's why I had to explain PhD level, cutting edge laser imaging to a snooker player. So he came into our lab one day and he said, I don't understand anything about physics. Can you explain it to me as if it was snooker? It's a tough gig. So I had to spend the next hour with John Parrott trying to explain how my laser imaging system worked, which was interferometry, if any of you are physicists, by trying to explain how the light and the photons were like snooker balls bouncing off cushions. Because that's what he understood. That was his world. It's kind of interesting when you start to adapt to someone else's world, how you can do interesting stuff. So that was quite a big challenge, and it opened up for me the idea that actually communication can be interesting and quirky and fun, and we can do interesting stuff with it. So that's John Parrott. Does anyone know who this guy is? I mentioned him yesterday. His name is Brian Cox. Okay. In the UK, most people know him because he used to be a pop star. He was in a band called D-Ream, had a really famous song out in the 90s. Okay. So he was a famous pop star. But what people didn't know when he was a famous pop star was that he was also studying for a PhD in physics. But no one mentioned this because it doesn't help you as a pop star to be doing a PhD in physics. You're already cool. You don't need to have extra physics points. So no one knew that he was doing a PhD in physics. So this pop band came and went, everyone forgot about them. And then all of a sudden, he's back on the TV accelerator out in France and Switzerland, and he's a cutting-edge scientist. And no one knew, because they thought he was just a pop star. But he's a nice-looking bloke, and he's very engaging. So he has TV shows in the UK, which are really, really popular, and he talks about the solar system and the universe and how physics works. And these programs have become enormously popular. An hour-long program about physics is on primetime TV, which is unusual, because he's an engaging speaker and he explains it in a way that the audience can understand. When I was doing my physics degree in the early 90s, no one wanted to do physics. He was a pop star at the time, but no one wanted to do physics. The numbers were declining. Because of his TV show, numbers of physics applications are massively increasing. You cannot fill up the physics places quickly enough at universities because of this guy and how he communicates with the public. Professor of physics engaging the audience on primetime TV. Fascinating thing. Okay, so we can't all be good-looking pop stars, but we can do interesting stuff. I'll be very surprised if anyone knows who this is. This is an academic from the US called Anne-Marie Thomas. And she's speaking here at something called TED Talks. Have you heard of TED Talks? Yeah, okay. The TED Talks is a great environment for you free stuff to explore how different speakers talk about interesting things. Great resource to watch. And you're not wasting time, you're learning how to communicate. So watch TED Talks, they're really good. And this is a great TED Talk about electrical conductivity. So we've got electronics people in the room, haven't we? Yeah, we've got some electronics people. So she was interested in how you explain electronics and electrical conductivity to kids. Because circuits are difficult for kids. They can't use soldering irons, they can't use circuit boards, all this kind of stuff. So she started doing this. This stuff's called Play-Doh, a modelling toy for kids, which conducts electricity, handily enough. Bet you didn't know that. So she started making stuff out of Play-Doh and making two types. So the yellow stuff, the regular stuff you buy in the shops, conducts electricity, and she made this other stuff with sugar instead of salt that is a resistor. So you can now make circuits out of Play-Doh. This is really cool. Kids just start really getting how electricity works just because of this way of communicating it, which is fascinating. You can play around with using tools that aren't our normal way of doing it. Try and give a lecture to a 6-year-old about how electricity works. They fall asleep or run off, do something else. Get them to play with this and light up light bulbs and make motors spin. They're excited and engaged. Quite good. Now this is an interesting thing. This is a YouTube channel, okay, which is popular in the UK. and it's a very strange concept. So this YouTube channel is called Dance Your PhD. You've heard of it? Okay. Are you going to try it one day?
I think I've watched the Australian version.
Okay. Yeah.
Australian version.
There's quite a few bits coming around. So, for example, you tell someone about their research, about your research, and they interpret it by the medium of dance, which is kind of strange. It sounds really weird, but it's kind of interesting to watch, isn't it? When they do it, you think this is never going to work, but they do capture moments of it. I'm not suggesting you need to dance your own PhDs, but there's different avenues of exploring this. So earlier I said the message and the method must be in tune. So explaining, what's your PhD title? Roughly.
Engineering stem cells.
So engineering of stem cells. Have you ever thought of dancing that? It's kind of intriguing, isn't it? There's all different ways of doing communication to make it interesting and engaging. This is a great website. The Rap Guide to Evolution. It's worth checking out. Evolutionary biologists making raps about their work. All this kind of stuff is out there and interesting, and a way of engaging audiences in different ways. We don't have to dance, we don't have to make raps, we don't have to play with Play-Doh. But these let us know that there are different options that we have. We can play around with different concepts, different features. Our job is to make it interesting. Okay? So, with that in mind, let's set you a little task, a little communication task. I'm not going to get you to rap or dance, but I'm going to get you to draw. That's a nice easy one we can do in the room. So we're going to explore how easy it is for us to explain our research to someone else. And I want to see what happens when we slightly shift concepts. Because when we're having a conversation, I'll tell you about my research, you'll nod and you'll understand a fair bit of it, and then you'll probably forget most of it within 20 seconds. I want to explore what happens if we want to make someone else understand it, so that they can explain it to someone else, because that's ideally what we want. So we're going to explore this through drawing. Okay. So a really simple task. You should all have little notepads that you got yesterday. So simple task. So if it was me and Narendra doing this task, I'd explain my research to Narendra. Okay. You can ask me questions about it as much as you like, clarify points, whatever. Your job then is to draw it. So you have to draw my research on here. Again, like yesterday, no words, just drawings. So you need to get as much information into your drawing that represents my research. Okay? So that's stage one. Okay? And then we'll swap. Narendra then will explain his research to me. I draw that down. So we'll both end up with a drawing of someone else's research. That's stage one. After that, we're going to swap partners, and we're going to try and explain someone else's research to them through the drawing. Okay? So does that make sense? 2 stages? Yeah? Okay, so what you'll need to start with then is a pad, a pen, or a selection of pens, and someone to talk to. So how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 17. We've got an odd number, but that's fine. If we have an odd number, we can do it in a 3, 1, 3. Okay? So find someone to talk to, get your pad and pen. It should take you round about 10 minutes to do 2 drawings. It doesn't have to be a really long drawing. I know with you guys that'll probably be 15 minutes at least, but I'll factor that in, that'll be all fine. I'll let you know when we've had enough time, so I'll give you warnings after 5 minutes and 10 minutes, and then we'll swap around. Okay? So, do some talking, do some drawing, have some fun. See you in a bit. You've done some good explaining. So tell me, what was it like to explain someone else's research? Yeah? Okay? They're still going different. Okay. How is it different, Ajay? Okay. Just hang on a sec. Guys? Hello? Thank you. Okay, so you don't know the area, but you have to explain it to someone else. This is a kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? So if we think about the research context for this, when you apply for funding, this is exactly what we're doing. We're explaining our research to someone else who then has to explain it to someone else. And they don't know your field. If we ever talk to the media or journalists, this is exactly the process that happens. We explain it and then they report it. It's kind of a really interesting idea that our communications very rarely just has one step to it. It often goes a few steps down the line. Someone else is often talking about our work or presenting our work to someone else, which is kind of interesting. So what was good? What made it work well?
We heard somebody his work maybe 3 to 5 minutes. We were able to explain those things maybe in 30 seconds.
Okay, so you got it into the simple element of it. You found the essence of it. Okay. Yes.
Making it really simple, but making it very clear by conveying the key concepts.
Okay.
So that the other person understands. Rather than going into too much of details, but conveying.
So we're going for simplicity, clarity, and the key message. Yeah. Okay.
Not losing the vital characteristic or body of.
So not getting too in depth.
Yeah.
Okay. Finding the core message. What else? Yeah.
Should have a story.
Okay.
From the beginning to end.
So you've got something to tell. You're telling the story about what's happening. Yeah, absolutely. Are you guys presumably are writing a thesis at some stage? Yeah, you're going to write a thesis? Your thesis is a story about how the world's changed because you've done some research. It's pretty much what the thesis is. So telling stories is a great idea. What else? What else worked well? Say again? The possible applications. So putting it in the real world. That made it easier for you to explain. What about the pictures themselves? How did they help?
It makes us easy.
How does it make it easy to understand?
Visualize.
Okay.
Able to visualize.
You can visualize what's happening. Okay. It's kind of useful to know. Yeah.
I think in thesis, instead of putting abstract words, you can put these images.
It's quite interesting.
It really works very well.
Yeah.
Deliver the key message.
Some journals now have visual abstract as an option, which is kind of interesting.
Graphical abstract.
Yeah, graphical abstract,
So
absolutely.
it helps us weave a story to give a continuity to what we are explaining.
Okay, so you've got something to anchor the story to. Here's the image. Okay, perfect. The intent of the work. Okay, so we can get what the purpose of it is. Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything that was hard or didn't work? It's just plain sailing all the way. Okay, I'm liking this. Okay, is communication always like that? Is it always easy? Does it always work perfectly every time? Well, it doesn't for me. But maybe it does for you guys. Maybe I'm in the wrong audience. We'll see. For me, there are things that can go wrong. I'm going to give you 3 examples. There's a really good book I use quite a lot, which is called Made to Stick, about making communication memorable. And we're going to use a couple of things from that book as we go through this morning. But one of the things the book does is condenses the things that can go wrong into 3 categories. And this is a really key one, lack of common language. You guys are all scientists and engineers. How easy would this be as an exercise if we had a really mixed group? If we put in artists and theologists and historians and social scientists and political scientists, biologists, would this have been just as easy? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? When I started doing my physics work in medicine, I found this exactly, lack of common language. So I was a physicist working with my equipment on a bench, and then I went to work in the hospital. And the first person I had worked with was actually an Indian called Dr. Haqqani. He was a pathologist in Fazakerley Hospital in Liverpool. And we found this straight away. We had no idea what each other were talking about. Both experts in our fields, both really intelligent, both with a lot of understanding. But there was a lack of common language. We couldn't understand it. It's kind of intriguing, isn't it? Did you find some concepts that you had to kind of dig into a little bit before they made sense? So lack of common language is a really key thing to do, and it can be dangerous when we're so expert that we start using words and terminology that's difficult for others to understand without really thinking about it. And that brings us on to the second one, which is this, the curse of knowledge. We can't imagine what it's like not to know that thing. It's really, have you ever tried to teach someone something that you're really good at, and it's really hard to explain? I taught my son a couple of years ago to ride a bicycle. This is a weird thing to teach someone because it's so natural that I can't work out what it's like not to know how to ride a bike. I just get on the bike and I go. How do you explain how the steering works or how to pedal at the same time? It's really hard to forget those kind of things. What I'd always recommend you do all through your life is always be a beginner at something. Doesn't matter what. Every year, just become a beginner. It's really good for this figuring out that we don't know stuff. So every year I always try and learn something new. So I'm always starting something new where I'm terrible at it because I don't understand it. It's a really good test because it keeps me fresh, that sometimes we know too much and we can't talk to people because of that. The third one, Sushra, you alluded to this one, decision paralysis. We know so much, our research is so big, we can't decide which bit to talk about. We've got so much work that this core message or the particular story can be hard to get our head around. We try and tell people too much stuff when we should just tell one story at a time. And one of the reasons we get muddled is we haven't decided which story is the one to tell. So let's have a look at some of these things. We'll play around with one of these. I'm interested in the lack of common language. Not least because you all did this to me yesterday. You all used jargon at me. Does everyone know what jargon is? Yeah, okay. So it's the curse of the intelligent. Okay. It's really useful for us in our arena to use jargon because it's quicker. So yesterday I asked you what universities you were from, and you all gave me acronyms. I'm from the IIT, something, I don't know what that means. I know you know what that means, but I don't. But this is a great example of jargon. Okay. It happens all the time. It's really difficult to make your work not have it in, make your conversation not have it in. But we're going to give ourselves a little test. So we'll play around with some jargon. What I'd like you to do is write a list. Okay. We're going to list number 1 is all the jargon that is in your work that you think other people won't be able to understand. Okay, so acronyms, particular terminology, all the difficult stuff that you use because you're an expert in your field, but no one else will really understand. Okay, and then we're going to write a second list. All the jargon, list, terminology, acronyms that you use that you think other people will be able to understand. So we'll end up with a difficult list and an easy list, and then we'll kind of see how those lists work on other people. So list, I'd go for around about 10 things on each list if you can. If it goes bigger, then great, but try and get at least 10 on there. So 2 lists, difficult jargon and what you think is easy jargon, and then we'll play around with that. Hello. Perfect. Yeah. Is this the easy one or the difficult?
Yeah, easy one.
Easy one. Oh, all right. Really? Okay. Stuff. No, not from the list, just from stuff that you know about in your work.
Okay.
So you need a list of the difficult terms you use, and then the ones you think are easy for other people to use. Does that make sense? Yeah. all acronyms. Okay. Well, let's do okay. That one I think, but it might depend.
Yeah, it's
that one
in
because you
UK as well. It's one in India as well.
Yeah, yeah. Like the National Physics Laboratory. Yeah. In that Indian Institute of Technology. Yes. No, no. I don't know all of them though. You do know. Okay. Yeah. You getting okay? What a few. Okay, so you've got some symbols on there as well. That's a good idea. Well, ideally 10 on each list, but we'll see. See how we get to. Okay, let's just take a pause there. You've all got some stuff on your list. If we don't quite have 10, that's fine, because we can fill them up as we go along. So how we're going to play around with these lists is we're going to find someone else to share our list with, ideally someone who's doing a different subject to you. So we have got a reasonable mix in the room, so you should be able to find someone who's not in your subject area. And then just get them to have a look through the lists. Okay, so you want to look through the other person's list and just tick off all the ones you understand. Okay, and we're just going to see how many on each list that you end up with. Okay, if there's one, so there's an acronym, for example. If it means something to you, tick it, and then check later on whether it's the same thing, because some acronyms are, you can use them for multiple things. Okay, so find someone to talk to and just compare your list, and we'll see how we're doing with those. How many did you understand?
This is my list. Easy ones, yeah, that's what this was.
Okay. Okay, so you've got your list the right way around, which is good.
This is mine and
Easy, I understood everything.
Okay.
Difficult, I understood too.
Okay. Okay, so not bad. So it means you know your list. So what was it? What are the ones that he didn't get?
He didn't get DMR.
Which is?
Difference metallurgical research.
Okay.
DMS transmitting electronics.
Yeah. Okay.
ACMS science.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And EDS is energy disposal spectrum.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, but none of these.
This is easy one. This is the
Okay. I use something called ICG in my work, not IPC. Okay.
actually your instrument is used in mechanical also.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. It kind of makes sense. Okay. Good stuff.
You get subject and just check it out.
Yeah, some people get them and some people won't. So, yeah.
So machine learning was relatively broad papers, which are general papers. I could have understood. But are these very commonly used short forms?
Okay.
Okay.
This means you know your difficult and easy well, which is good to know. How are we getting on over here? Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay, how did we get on? Let's start with the easy list. Who got all of their easy list? The other person understood everything on their easy list. Yeah? Everything? Yeah? Got everything on your easy list? I thought you missed one off. Oh, you got everything on his easy list, okay. So the people who wrote those easy lists, you obviously know what the easy stuff is, so well done. Who got everything on the hard list correct? No? Who got nothing on the difficult list? You got nothing on the difficult list, you got nothing on the difficult list, okay. This is kind of interesting. So all this difficult stuff that we've put, well done for knowing that it's difficult. This is a good thing. So when we're doing communication with lots of people, we know not to use that stuff, okay. There's a reason why it's difficult. People don't know what it means. But the lesson with the easy stuff is, use with caution. So you've got all his, but most of you, there's stuff missing. And this is the curse of knowledge coming into play. We can't get our heads around the fact that people don't know that thing. It's such an obvious thing. What else would you say? And this happens not just with acronyms. There's lots of acronyms knocking around. My PhD was rife with acronyms. I used a technique called OCT. Okay. I don't know if any of you know what that means, but there you go. OCT. Optical coherence tomography. Okay. I used that, which meant I was referring to things like MRI and ultrasound, which I referred to as US, which of course is a country as well. So you can be a bit careful. And I just assume everyone knows what MRI means, because I'm so used to knowing what it means. It's quite hard to explain what it is to someone else. You just get into the habit of doing it. This curse of knowledge is really important. So one of the things to do to test this is to find a friend who's not in your subject area and just tell them about your work. Get into the habit of talking about your stuff and set them the task of every time you use a word they don't understand, you have to give them some money. This is a good test. So what would be a good fee in rupees? How much do we need to give them? Let's set ourselves a target. 100 rupees for every word they don't understand? Is that too much? Okay, you can set the fee. It's a really good test to do it. Try it. But we always use jargon, even when we're trying not to. So when I was editing these slides a couple of days ago before the session, there was that word yesterday, phenonomographic. And I thought to myself, that's an awful word. I don't really know what it means. I looked it up in my dictionary on my computer. It wasn't there. So I had to go to a different dictionary to look it up to find out what it meant. And I thought, right, that's one of the ones that's going. I'll take that word out. And then I thought, actually, no, I'm going to leave it in, because it'll be nice when we get to this bit to have this phenonomographic, strange word in the background. Okay, so this is jargon, a good thing to leave out of our talk if we can. Let's move on to how we can improve our communication. A couple of things here. A big one for me is this sort of stuff around assumptions. Always check. Do you understand? Is that okay? Do you get that? Do you understand that word? Just always check. Assumptions are a really difficult thing. People don't like feeling stupid, so it's really hard for them to admit that they don't understand. If you talk to me about your work, I'm quite clever, and I don't really get it. I'm not just going to go, no, I don't understand that. I'm going to go, yeah, all right, good. And then go away in panic because I don't know what was going on. Just check understanding. Okay. It isn't just about words. When we're talking, obviously it is, but we can use other stuff. The way you did the images was brilliant. They're a really, really effective way of explaining things. Use those. Actually, drawing things for people is a great way of doing it, or having visuals with you. Using visuals on slides is an obvious way of doing it too. I like this stuff about being aware of your audience. So we're going to do a little bit of a test on how good we are at knowing what audiences look like. So can you all look bored for me? No, you can't look bored. See, you're smiling, that's not bored. Do your best bored face. Okay. Look really sleepy. Go on, look really sleepy for me. So we kind of need to pick up these cues in an audience. look really engaged, as if I'm the most fascinating person that you've ever witnessed speaking in front of you. See, this is good. I'm liking this. Keep this up for the rest of the day. I'm enjoying this. But actually getting good at looking at your audience and figuring out where they are is a really good way of checking this understanding. Just get used to looking for the visual clues. People are doing this. You're probably saying a little bit too much. Okay, so learn to know when to stop. In the academic world, in my experience, when someone yawns, usually the academic on the other end takes that as a cue that they need to explain more fully. I don't know why academics think this, but that seems to be what they do. I've met many professors like this. You yawn at them and they'll say, oh no, there's more. I don't know why. Ask them questions. This is a really good way of, we talked about how putting it in the real world and telling stories. Asking questions is a good way of finding out what their understanding is and how you can put it in terms they understand, like John Parrott and the snooker. So understanding what they understand means you can put it into their world and explain it in their terms, which is really useful. Okay, so lots of stuff to remember there. Remember the book I talked about? What was it called? Made to Stick. Well done. Okay. So well done. You get bonus points. 100 rupees for you remembering. It's really tough to remember though, isn't it? Because I just said it in passing, so it didn't go in. And this is the whole point of the book. It's about making communication memorable. You've just explained research, someone else's research to someone else. I wonder in a week how much of it you'll remember. It's kind of intriguing. We want to make people remember our stuff, okay, because it's really important. So we need to make our communication memorable. So this book is called Made to Stick. It's about memorable communication. I'm going to tell you a story about how it came into being. So it's called Made to Stick, and it's by two brothers, Chip and Dan Heath, who are both Americans. One works in psychology, one works in education. And they got together because they were starting to notice that communication problems were similar in both their arenas, and they wanted to know what to do about it. They were kind of both intrigued at the time about how government-sponsored communication was being really ineffective. So in the United States, there was a big initiative around to try and stop people getting anemia, which is an iron deficiency. So they wanted them to take iron supplements. And so they did a big campaign trying to explain how much iron you should have each day, which is, nobody knows. Exactly the point. 14 milligrams, if you're interested. Eat some broccoli, it's good for you. But no one remembered this. This was $1 billion initiative to try and get people to have the right amount of nutrition, but really, really ineffective. Around about the same time, in San Francisco, there was a story going around, and it went a little bit like this. So there was a businessman, finished a hard day's work, goes into a bar, orders himself a drink. Just as he's finishing the drink, a beautiful woman walks up to him, asks him if he'd like another. Being a businessman away from home, he accepts the offer of a drink from the beautiful woman. The next thing he knows, he wakes up in a bathtub full of ice in a hotel room. And on the wall is a post-it note saying, "Call 911, you've had your kidneys harvested." So the rumour was that there were criminal gangs going around California, drugging people and harvesting their kidneys to sell them to donors. Okay? There's no evidence that this has ever happened, but it was a really prominent story. And people would tell each other, businessmen stopped accepting drinks from beautiful women in bars as a consequence of this story. It was all pervasive. No one could remember how much iron to eat, but we knew to be wary of beautiful women buying us drinks. These brothers got really interested in why this was true. Why was the urban legend so much more memorable and tellable than the $1 billion government initiative? So they started doing research into all kinds of things, and they came up with 6 key things that help our communication stick, help it be rememberable, help other people tell our stories. It works out as an acronym, as all these things always do, and we've just done acronyms. This one's misspelled, which amuses me a little bit. Okay, so first thing, simplicity. It's much easier to remember a simple thing than a complicated thing. We all know this. You talked about simplicity. Newspapers know this, because they have small headlines, followed by the same story a bit longer, followed by exactly the same story again. The headline is the thing that works. The simple message is the thing we'll tell to other people. Okay? simplicity works. Einstein has a lovely quote: "Make things as simple as possible, but no simpler." I like that. Doesn't make grammatical sense, but you kind of remember it. So simplicity is really good. Does anyone here use Twitter? Yeah, you use Twitter. So Twitter's a really interesting example of simplicity. Because we have limited space, we have to get to the core of it. Or as some people do, just keep writing tweets after tweet after tweet so you get more words, but we're not going to go down that route. Simplicity is a really good thing. Okay, number 2. Unexpected. 1.5 years, 1 year. So we're going to soon have a room full of doctors. This is nice. I'm going to like this. And you're going to miraculously be credible because you have doctor before your name. Intriguing. It's a nice thing to know. People do respect that kind of stuff. You do get credibility by being called doctor something or another. I don't really use it that much, but it's kind of handy sometimes to be called Dr. Russell. It does make a bit of a difference. It gives me credibility in certain arenas. So credibility can come from this expertise, but also knowledge. So let's take an example. If we wanted to get people to talk to you about drug addiction, who would be good people to talk to you about drug addiction, to stop you becoming drug addicts? Which is probably not likely, but let's roll with it. Okay, so someone, a doctor in that kind of area, doctor of drug addiction, someone working public health. Who else might be good? How about a recovered drug addict? They'd be the 2 I want, a doctor of public health and a recovered drug addict. So you're going to get the expert story and you're going to have been through the experience. So credibility can come through experience, not just knowledge, which is kind of useful to know. So when you're talking to other people, put them in the experience. That will give them credibility. A good example of this is testability. Allowing people to play with the concepts themselves really works. So a couple of years ago in the US, there was a really bad winter, really big freeze. I don't know if you saw any of this on the news. Okay. And during this big freeze, somebody discovered that if you threw a cup of boiling water into the sky, it would make snow. This is an interesting thing. So guess what happened? Everyone went and boiled the kettle, filled up a cup, and went outside and threw water and made snow. And they filmed it and put it on YouTube. So this is a great credible story. You could tell someone that boiling water would freeze instantly, and they'd say, oh, maybe, don't know, no, it's too hot. They might not believe it, but if they can try it themselves, that then becomes credible. So YouTube had some lovely footage of people making snow, and some alarming footage of people burning their own faces because it was windy and it just blew into their face. But there you go. All good fun. So credible is a good thing to do. How about this? Emotional. This isn't a word that academics use very often, is it? When was the last time you went to an emotional lecture? Yeah, any of your professors of science and technology ever made you cry? No? It doesn't happen too often, does it? Emotion's not a word that we think of as scientists and engineers as being something that we can do. But whoever you're communicating to, it's always a person. They always have an emotional connection somehow. So you can go for the full story of medical applications, okay? In the early 90s in the UK, there was a controversy about a vaccine that was going around that you give to young children. It's called the MMR vaccine. And in most other countries it's fine, no one worried about it. But there was a particular scientist who was convinced there was a link between this vaccine and autism. Okay? And he told the press about this. And there was a big public health scare where people were worried about giving this vaccine to their children. And even the Prime Minister wouldn't tell us whether he'd given it to his child or not, which was kind of interesting. And this was a really emotional story. And so on the news you would end up with these little debates, and the debates usually, it was an academic in a tweedy jacket telling us about statistics, okay? And on the other side you had a crying mother with a sick child. Who did the public believe? Yeah, it's really hard not to be convinced by a crying mother with a sick child, no matter how good the statistics are. That's not a battle they could ever win. Emotional always wins over statistics. The academics should have gone for the other emotional story, that if you don't have the vaccine, actually you get really sick. They could have played that card. a legitimate academic argument, but played on the emotions in the same way. So you can do it the same way. So we don't have to make everyone cry, but we do need to connect with them as human beings, and that's important to remember. Emotion isn't just the extremes of anger and elation and sadness. It can just be human connection. Connect with the person on a human level. And think about how your research fits into their world. This will save you money. That's an emotional thing. Okay? It might seem like a statistic, but people like their money. So connecting about how it will save them money or time or make their education better for their kids, all this kind of stuff is really good to connect with them. And the final thing we have is stories. Okay? We talked about stories and how telling a narrative is a really good way of threading things together. I'm guessing that you'll be able to tell the story of the ice-filled bathtub to someone else tomorrow and next week. It's a really simple story with key unexpected elements to it. It's got most of those things in it. Okay? And that makes it very easy for us to tell. Stories are very, very old. Humans have been telling them for thousands and thousands of years. Academic journals, they're pretty new in the scheme of things. You never hear about ancient tribes around the campfire saying, introduction, materials and methods, results and conclusion. That's not how people tell stories in the real world. Most religious texts are written as stories. They tell morality through parables, and all of them do that. Which is kind of really intriguing. Those stories are really effective. The ancient religious texts are way older than the journals that we'll write in. No one will remember my paper in OCT in 2,000 years. Okay? But all the religious texts will still be there. The stories are really, really powerful. And your thesis is a story. Your research is a story. We just don't think of it in those terms all the time. So when we've come back from our break, we're going to tap into these little ideas and do some exercises to try and bring them out of our own work. Okay? And then we'll start thinking about how we can do the last one, thread stories in a particular way to engage the people we're speaking with. Okay? Does that sound like a plan? Okay. Lovely. It's a little before 11, so I think now's a good time to take some tea and coffee, have a little break. The question I always ask you is how long you'd like.
The answer is, I think he gave me yesterday, 5 minutes.
Yeah, the answer is 5 minutes, but the reality is always slightly different. So can we play a game of realism? What's a realistic time that you're going to be back in this room listening to me talk?
25 minutes.
15 minutes.
15 minutes. So can I hold you to that 15 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, fine. We'll start in 15 minutes. Perfect. See you in a bit.